free Odyssey app, and of course streaming on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see John Machota, the Cowboys beat reporter for The Athletic, guy I used to run into in the locker room down in Dallas many years ago. John, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. I wish I had a lot more Cowboys stuff to talk about, but hey, I guess it ties in with Washington though. But no, I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'd say you're very opposite of, say, your colleague Ben Standig, who
Yeah.
the Commanders have signed more players than anybody else to this point in free agency. The Cowboys have signed 0 new players as we speak right now. We'll circle back to Dallas in a moment, but the Commanders have signed 2 former Cowboys players, Tyler Biadasz and Dorance Armstrong. What do you make? Let's start with Armstrong of that signing. How important was he in Dallas, and what kind of player is Washington getting there?
Yeah, he's a really good player. Good, not only a good contributor on defense, but he's a really good special teams player as well. So you're getting a quality player. I will say, I think that the deal is 3 years, worth up to 15. I think it's around 11 million per year.
Right.
I think that's a good contract for him. The Cowboys are never going to pay it because of, one, they have Micah Parsons they still have to pay. They still have DeMarcus Lawrence, and those two are obviously their starting edge rushers. But then there's also a young guy they drafted a couple years back in Sam Williams, where moving on from Dorance Armstrong will let Sam play more. And so I think that all of that factored in, that if you asked me to make a prediction before free agency started, like where do you think one of these Cowboys guys will sign, Dorance Armstrong to Washington with Dan Quinn makes too much sense. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he works, because he's obviously going to have a bigger workload. He was in the second team crew, but I mean, he produced well. He was second on the team in sacks. I mean, he's a productive player. So they're getting a good player, but I see Washington asking him to be a starter now and put up that type. And maybe he is ready for that. Obviously Dan Quinn likes him a lot. So I think it's a good get for Washington, but it's not one that I think Cowboys fans or the team are looking at it like, man, we were really trying to bring him back. I think they knew he played to a level where he was going to be priced out of what they were able to afford.
Yeah, no, that's good insight. So this is a guy that has actually had pretty good sack production. Obviously that whole Dallas front seems to have a lot of sack production, Parsons being the horse, but a lot of other guys have gotten it too. In fact, Armstrong's sack numbers would have been some of the best on the Commanders the last couple of years. Where does he get his sacks? Are these effort plays? Does he have some pass rush moves? Are they when he's lined up inside, outside? Like, where are these sacks coming from for Dorance Armstrong?
Yeah, he obviously isn't a guy that's got the moves like a Micah Parsons, but
Well, nobody does.
yeah, he's got a mix of a lot of different things. He's a strong guy. And he's got good quickness, so I don't think there's like one area of his game that really makes him stand out. I do think that he's a guy that he's a hard worker. He's going to play through things, as Jason Garrett would say, I guess, right kind of guy type player. And so because of that, I think it just...
Was that personal? Did you just try to give me flashbacks to the Jason Garrett era that I had to cover down there?
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
absolutely. So I just think he's a good fit, and I think a big part of bringing him in is just the fact of you have this head coach who's obviously worked with him in Dan Quinn, who these are the type of guys you want when you're going in a new building, guys that know what you want, you know what you can get from them, and a guy that can kind of maybe be a leader for you behind the scenes in the locker room and things like that. And with all that stuff, I just think Dorance checks off all those boxes.
Yeah, I didn't realize they had the team's value as well. And one of the guys that I think he'll mainly be replacing here is a guy like James Smith-Williams, who was a really similar type of player, a little bit younger. Armstrong's got more experience and has a lot more sack production. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of role he fills for Washington and whether he ultimately starts, but it certainly seems like it'll be that way. John Machota covers the Cowboys for The Athletic with us, giving us some insight on some of the new Commanders here on the Team 980. Tyler Biadasz played a lot down there at center. Is this, again, a player that they wanted to hold on to, and what is Washington getting in their new starting center?
I would say Washington paid him what he's worth. I think the Cowboys wanted a team-friendly type deal where he was giving them a bargain. And if you're Tyler Biadasz, why do that? And again, a guy that Dan Quinn is obviously going to know well. And so I don't think their offer was anywhere close to that. I don't even know what their offer was, to be honest with you, but it was never going to be that. They feel confident that they can draft another center. Their last 2 standout centers have been, Travis Frederick and Tyler Biadasz, and it would not surprise me if they drafted another center, maybe middle of the draft. I don't think they'll be spending a first-round pick like they did with Frederick, unless, The Jackson Powers Johnson kid from Oregon could obviously be a possibility, but I don't
Sure.
think they're going to address the center that early. And I think that they feel like they can get away with a younger center that maybe, is going to take some time to develop, kind of like the way Biadasz did. So I think he's a solid center. I think he's probably one of the top 10 in the league, and he's being paid as such. So I think it's a good deal for them. I never got the sense that especially being out at the combine a couple of weeks ago there, I just didn't get the feeling that they were really going to go in pretty heavy to try and bring him back, even though, I mean, he's been solid. He's a good player. He's not Frederick. He's obviously not Jason Kelsey or something like that, but I think he's a good quality starting center that you can count on. He'll be there. There's not much that a defense is going to do that he hasn't seen before. He did a lot of calling things out in the Cowboys offense with Dak. I mean, he's a smart player. So I think for where Washington's at, I mean, I feel like they're going to draft a quarterback, with that second pick, or maybe they trade up or whatever. But I feel like if you're going to be dealing with a really young quarterback, why not have a veteran center that has seen just about everything that a defense can do?
Yeah, and hearing that he called a bunch of signals, even with Dak there as a veteran, like that, I think that's music probably to a lot of Commanders fans' ears, knowing that you can have a young guy coming in playing quarterback. I also heard that he's not like a media darling by any sense of the imagination. Doesn't really do a lot of talking, but is the kind of guy that'll get in some training camp scraps, things like that. What kind of dude is he coming into this locker room?
He'll definitely get in some scraps. He definitely will protect the quarterback, which is absolutely what you want with any quarterback, but especially with a younger quarterback. A guy that you'll know always has your back. So he'll do that. With the media, though, it's interesting you bring that up because I don't know, like my time covering the Cowboys has been a lot of the offensive line doesn't really say much. And it comes from a trickle down of kind of right before I kind of got on the beat that it kind of goes back to like Mark Colombo and Kyle Kosher and a few others where they kind of set the tone of like, we're not going to be talking a lot. And so then that went right into when I started covering the team. My first year was 2011. So that first draft was Tyron Smith. So he picked up right where he left off. And, the offensive line has kind of been like that, kind of like, hey, we're going to do our job. We're not going to really say much. But I'll say this about Biadasz. If you go up to him on your own, like he'll talk to you. Like he's not going to make a bunch of headlines. But like if you have a question about a play or something like that, like he's not one of these guys that doesn't want to talk to reporters or anything like that. So, I think you know what I'm talking about. You've been in locker rooms where there's certain guys where you're just like, don't even bother going up to him. That guy wants no part of the media. He doesn't want to help you out.
Or like if the swarm of cameras and the lights come up, they're going to be like, I'm not doing this. But like if you're in there every day and you put in the work and you ask good questions, they're happy to talk to you.
100%. And that's definitely how Tyler is for sure.
Nice. That is definitely good to know, especially if he's that smart of a player, because you can get good insight on what actually happened from those guys. Also sounds like he and Sam Cosmi might become best friends, because you want to talk about nasty dudes that'll get it, protect their quarterback. Like that's Sam Cosmi to a T. Biadasz now added to that list. John Machota is our guest, a Cowboys beat reporter for The Athletic. So then there's the team that you cover, John. They haven't done anything. This is after Jerry Jones, of course, came out and was like, we got to do all kinds of whatever the quote was. I'm sure you know it. It's just being emblazoned down there in Dallas, the Jerry quote of how this offseason was supposed to go, and then being used as kind of a meme that they haven't really done anything yet. What do you make of their lack of activity through a day and a half of free agency here?
It's not a surprise because it's business as usual for them. But the reason why people are expecting different is because Jerry made these comments about the team being all in. It started out at the Senior Bowl, and then obviously he was asked a bunch when we talked to him at the Combine at the end of the week on his bus. And we asked in a bunch of different ways of what does all in mean, and in a very signature Jerry way, he just didn't give you a solid answer because he really wants exactly what we're doing right now. He wants you talking about the team. It does not bother him at all that there's people out there saying like, oh, Jerry's just talks and whatever he says, don't even worry about it. He's just talking. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care because he's just happy you're even talking about the Cowboys. So that doesn't bother him that you're ripping him or anything like that. But most people, 99.9% of people would have, in his position, would not have made those comments about being all in, because when you say that, then people are expecting results. And when it's not like you got to dig back to the 70s and 80s or something. Just look at the last 4 years. We've known who the all-in teams were, specifically in the NFC. We knew the most all-in team last year was the Niners. They went to the Super Bowl. The year before that, we knew the most all-in team was the Eagles. Went to the Super Bowl. The year before that, it was the Rams. The year before that, it was the Buccaneers. So it's like when you say all-in, people are like, oh, I know what all-in looks like. I know exactly what it looks like. And they get excited because you're coming off of that disaster that lost the Packers. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but there's very little chance that the Cowboys roster is going to be better this upcoming season than it was last season. And fans know that. I mean, they know that it's a blown opportunity that they didn't make a deep playoff run last year. And so what's the best way to try and get over that? Oh, well, next year. Oh, well, this is going to be different. And it's not different. They're doing the same offseason, draft, develop, pay their own guys. They don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize them re-signing Dak, CD, or Micah Parsons. And so you end up being the only team on day one of this negotiating period that does not make a deal to bring back any of your players or any other player from another team. I mean, 32 teams, you're the only one that doesn't do anything. That's going to make fans really upset. And then today, they end up they agreed to a deal to bring back their long snapper, Trent Sig, for a year. So it's like, that's not doing anything. It's almost like you're like, don't even announce that right now. That's just going to make people even more angry. So I will say this real quick. I wanted to add in there, though. I don't think Washington's done, though, going after Cowboys free agents.
Now, I was going to ask you next,
yeah.
Because I think Tyron would make a lot of sense.
Sure.
I think that Jaron Kearse could make a lot of sense.
100%.
Stephon Gilmore, they need a corner. Like, are there any of those guys, whether you've heard stuff that there's been talks preliminarily, because obviously you've been covering some of these guys, like in Tyron's case, you've been covering his whole career, whether you know them, their agents, whatever, whoever you talk to about these things, or just your football acumen, you're like, that's a good fit. That's a guy that Dan Quinn probably would go after.
Everyone you named, and then I'd also include Dante Fowler in there because he's the type of veteran. You get a one-year deal done with him. And the Dan Quinn connection, I mean, it's the Cowboys, it's the Falcons. It goes all the way back to the University of Florida. What Dan Quinn wants to do, Dante Fowler fits it, and Dante Fowler knows what Dan Quinn wants and just goes about his business.
That is literally his coach.
Right. So I will say one thing that is funny about Dante Fowler, and he's not a bad dude or anything like that, but it goes back to the Biadasz thing. In the last year, I would say he, to me, is probably the number one guy that is the least in the locker room. Like, doesn't care about doing any of the media stuff. Like, if you get him, he'll talk, but he does not. Like, you know how there's some guys that they just sit in the locker room, they're fine, they hang out, want to talk. He is almost never in the locker room. So he is very like a Dan Quinn guy. So Dante Fowler and Jaron Kearse are the two that Dan Quinn is brought out the best in those guys. It just makes too much sense. And when the Cowboys last offseason got deals done with Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, and they didn't with Jaron Kearse, the writing was kind of on the wall that, like, well, we're not going to be giving all our safeties new deals. And so Jaron didn't really have the big year that I thought he was going to have and that he thought he was going to have. And so now he hits free agency, and I'm just like, you played your best ball a couple years ago under Dan Quinn. I don't see why he wouldn't be trying to get back there, and plus safeties don't cost a ton. So, I don't think that they're done. That Washington has money. Dan Quinn knows what guys have worked. He's been around them long enough. So, I don't think they're done at all with any of these guys. The Tyron Smith one will be the interesting thing because, the Cowboys would like to bring him back, but if another team is going to offer him something really good, then he's going to take it. I'm just kind of interested to see it happen because I always thought Tyron was a guy that would just play his whole career with the Cowboys, and if they didn't offer him enough money, he would just retire. And maybe that still happens. But I'm sure, again, if you have a young quarterback, that would be a great left tackle to have a veteran around him.
Do you feel like he still has good ball and like 14 plus games of it per season for a couple of years left in him? Or are these injuries blips on the radar and all of a sudden we're going to be looking up and he's having a Jason Peters type, maybe not Peters because he's playing until he's 180, but some of these other tackles that have been able to play into their mid to late 30s, or is the beginning of the end already happened for Tyron Smith?
Oh, the beginning of the end has definitely happened. I only think he has like another year or two tops. But the thing is that you're not going to get 17 games out of him. But with the way Mike McCarthy has done it, where he has his practice scheduled during the week, where Tyron isn't involved in a lot of the padded work, things like that, giving him days off, has had him ramp up and be at his best on Sundays. And so I think you can count on him for 14, 15 games. And in those games, he will play at a very high level. I mean, when he was playing last year and he was healthy, he was one of the better left tackles in the game, which, is what he's been for the majority of his career. One of the reasons why, I believe he'll be in Canton, he'll be in the Cowboys Ring of Honor. So I'm just interested to see, because to me, especially with a young quarterback in Washington, is that going to be turned around fast enough for Tyron? Or is he going to try and go to a team that is on the cusp right now of like, hey, all they're missing is a left tackle. So that will be an interesting part. But if he wants to keep playing and no one else is offering him what Washington is, that would certainly make some sense for sure. But no, there's still some tread left on that tire. I mean, when he was playing last year, he was playing well. It just, you got to really manage him during the week. And again, having Dan Quinn as the head coach, he's been around him. He's been around the plan that Mike McCarthy has kind of tinkered with Tyron, with Zach Martin, to make them their best on Sunday. So he's going to know how to use them if Tyron wants to join them.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. And like if you draft a developmental piece, getting that kid that extra practice time is not the worst thing in the world for the long term either. So potential chance to do two things at once. John Machota, read his work in The Athletic. Great stuff covering the Cowboys, great insight, and I hope they give you something to write about soon. There's never anything happening with the Cowboys. I'd hate for you to get bored for, a half an hour.
Yeah, hopefully it's positive though. I don't. I would rather stay away from having to do a bunch of off the field guys getting in trouble stuff. So yeah, maybe make a trade for somebody that'll really stir things up. That would be nice. Yeah.
Do it for John.
Right,
John. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening